Now that you are sitting comfortably and looking very attentive, I am going to tell you the story of Rush. It is a very, very long story, but since I can see you are already a little bit sleepy, I am going to tell you the short version, hitting just the high notes as it were, just enough to give you the idea. Like all good stories, the story of Rush has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And as this is not a modern story, we are going to begin at the beginning. Once upon a time, not so long ago, in a place not so far away, there was a family of primates, Tully primates, and they lived in Tullyland. There was a daddy primate and a mommy primate and 6 little primates, the second of which, depending on what you are talking about, was Rushy primate, or Rushy P for short. From the beginning, he was an odd little primate, clearly not at all sure that he had popped up somewhere where he really wished to be, clearly a little distressed that he could not return from where he had come from. Tullyland was actually pretty interesting, with its own charm, with its own color, with its own spectrum of complexities. And of course there were the great foreign lands, outside of Tullyland, filled with mystery and adventure. These, though, Rushy P found of little interest and mostly ignored, preferring instead to sequester himself in the quiescent regions of Tullyland, quietly stare about a lot, talk to himself, hum a bit, and interminably play with the little toy animals that seemed to ceaselessly flock about him, they as happy to be in his presence as he was in theirs. Generally, though, Rushy P found Tullyland to be reasonably conducive to a happy time, certainly better than many other places he could have arbitrarily popped up in. True, there were lots and lots of rules and regulations, niceties and subtleties, to living there that he did not fully grasp, not for want of discernment, but simply by way of their incomprehensibility. These he therefore also largely ignored, the Tullyland hinterlands providing nearly endless avenues of escape. Along the way he did learn a few things to stand him in good stead. For example, he learned to hum in 4-part harmony. He learned not to always do what his older sibling primate suggested he do, but to be somewhat circumspect about these suggestions. And he learned that it hurts if you let a lit match burn down to your fingers. As the years went on and Rushy P went from fledgling to stripling, the time approached for him to leave Tullyland and to go out on the sea of life. This was a prospect that Rushy P looked forward to with great, if quiet, excitement, spurred in part by the occasional message in a bottle that washed up onto Tullyland from his older sibling primate who had disappeared into the sea of life a few years before. In his heated imagination, Rushy P, though these fevered thoughts were vague and opaque, imagined that being out on the sea of life was a sort of extension of, a magnification of, indeed an exponential enhancement of playing with little animals in the moors of Tullyland, but even more fun, if you can imagine that. The time for departure came. Rushy P's new little boat was loaded with provisions, among which were a few fragments of his humming, his trusty guitar, and a box of oatmeal cookies. Everyone in Tullyland came down to the shore to wave goodbye. The great blue expanse of the Sea of Life looked inviting. It beckoned him forth. Its siren call encouraged him to sally onward. Alas, no sooner had Rushy P disappeared over the horizon on the Sea of Life than he was rocked by ferocious storms that came up in the west. Wholly unexpectedly, of course, as he wasn't actually aware that there were storms on the Sea of Life, nor was he at all prepared for this rather unpleasant circumstance. And this was only the beginning. As Rushy P sailed further and further onto the seemingly endless Sea of Life, he was assailed by all manner of dangers, beset all around by trials that each threatened to upend his little boat and toss him into the sea, leaving him to sink beneath the waves, leaving him to join other unfortunates suspended in its murky depths. There were not only raging black storms to contend with. Sometimes the seas were eerily becalmed. the sun centering itself and resting heavily on his little boat, in which case he could scarcely move and nearly melted through the boards. Sometimes he came upon huge unseen whirlpools that clutched his little boat and swirled it round and round and round, sucking him down, 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 down toward its deathly bottom. Sometimes great sea monsters appeared, swimming in the circles about his boat, waiting for him to lean just far enough over its edge for them to snatch him and mash him to smithereens. Once even, a huge, dark volcano just rose up out of the sea dead ahead and began raining hot lava all around, a miracle that the little boat was not burned to a little crisp. How could this be? How could he get it so completely wrong? How could the Sea of Life turn out to be the very opposite of what he had so often and so happily imagined in the sandboxes of Tullyland? And where was Tullyland now, anyhow? No, Rushy P was not out on the Sea of Life for very long before the stark realization bore in on him that being out on the Sea of Life is not at all like playing with little animals in the now lost haven of Tullyland, and certainly not at all as fun. Not that the Sea of Life was totally devoid of incidental pleasures, mostly in the form of small islands that were never, of course, charted. Nothing was charted on the Sea of Life, but would simply appear off the bow, generally easily accessible with their beaches gently slipping into the sea, generally providing respite, if but briefly, from the never-ending succession of mortal dangers that appeared to define to near exclusion the wide expanse of the Sea of Life. On one of these islands, many years after setting sail on the Sea of Life, Rushy P very surprisingly came upon a little primate running loose amongst the palm trees. How he got there, Rushy P could not at all determine, but he thought that this small island was not really somewhere the little primate should be left. So he decided to take the little primate on his travels. He called the little primate Willie Primate, or Willie P for short. The little primate called him. Duh! It seemed appropriate. They would be mates, and they would travel the seas together. The Sea of Life is a very big sea. It doesn't have landmarks or maps, hints as to where to go or what to do, or instructions on how to do once you get there. It stretches on and on and on. No one knows where it starts. No one knows where it ends. Rushy P and Willie P sailed the Sea of Life for years and years and years, until one day. One day, Rushy P and Willie P were trying to outrun a terrible hurricane of huge proportion on the Sea of Life. They were mightily exhausted, having battled the sky demons for nights and nights. They were nearing the end of their resources. They were fearful of their reserves to hold on, the possibility that the Sea of Life might reclaim them all too real. In the midst of these rages, Rushy P thought he saw to the far northeast a vestige of land, a bit of beach showing itself in the lightning strikes. With their last gasps of will, they made for this lifeline and narrowly slipped into the island's spacious harbor, the storm relentless in its pursuit. Then they collapsed senseless on the deck. When they stirred many days later, it was to an oddly familiar but surely never before experienced vista. Rushy P thought he must be dreaming, for he felt rather than saw that all around lay what he thought the Sea of Life should hold those many, many years before when he set off from Tullyland. Wondrously, tremulously, he surveyed the surrounds they found themselves in. Apparently, this very large island was shaped like a quarter moon, sort of like a huge smile, since they were ensconced in a calm, placid, bright blue bay, shaped by the inner edge of the island. The sun soothed with what felt to be a warm coconut oil massage. On the shore, they could see what looked to be a number of primates, similar but different, waving and smiling, indicating for them to come ashore. As they lowered the dinghy, Rushy P felt light-hearted, a little giddy. He wanted to hum with happiness. As they stepped onto the shore, they were met by a small group of primates. Rushy P's heart skipped a beat, for leading the group was one of the most devastating and shattering visions of feminine pulchritude he had ever seen. Though, of course, he hadn't seen much of feminine anything, much less pulchritude, during his many lost years on the Sea of Life. "Who are you?" he asked diffidently. Regally stanced, she answered, "I am Maria P., sovereign queen of these lands you have put foot upon. This is the hallowed and blessed principality of Maria Land." Welled up in Rushy P. such an unknown feeling of joy that he, quite inappropriately for the moment, burst out in monumental humming, much burbling, and to a much taken aback Maria P. an Irish jig. In fact, much overwrought with deep happiness, his loud and inchoate burbling, mostly about his years on the Sea of Life, continued throughout the morning and into the early afternoon, then into the late afternoon. Maria P. and her court, which consisted of her own little primates, Michael Primate and Crystal Primate, or Michael P. and Crystal P., grew tired and a bit out of sorts from standing hard for so long in the broiling sun, doubly hot from its direct rays and its rays glancing off the glass sea. Finally, in a desperate and, in retrospect, rash attempt to get Rushy P. to shut up, she invited Rushy P. and Willie P. to a feast being prepared for the evening. This did not do the trick. Though there was much feasting, much laughing, and a lot of dancing around, Rushy P. did not shut up, did not even slow down throughout the long night. Nearly beside herself and casting wildly about for some solution to this increasingly worrisome state of affairs, Maria P., in a fevered fit of consternation, invited Rushy P. and Willie P. to live with her in Maria Land, with her two little primates, Michael P. and Crystal P., neither of whom were at all sure that this would increase the overall attractiveness and palatability of Maria Land. Overcome, Rushy P. swooned mightily, and it was days before he recovered sufficiently to answer the question. And this is how it came to pass that Rushy P. and Willie P. lived, and still do live, in Maria Land, a land and its primates that Rushy P. had dreamed of so many years ago when dreaming his dreams of how the Sea of Life was going to be. So much more than merely playing with little animals, though I must tell you that living in Maria Land indeed does include quite a large element of playing with little animals even yet. So Rushy P. and Maria P. lived and lived and lived in Maria Land. Then they went out and rode bicycles. Then they lived and lived some more. It's been 20 years since Rushy P. came to live in Maria Land. There is still a lot of feasting and dancing about. By and large, Rushy P. does quite a bit of humming and chirping and burbling. Indeed, despite Maria P.'s most innovative stratagems, Rushy P. continues to burble incessantly, no mechanism or inducement yet found to get him to shut up. Maria P. continues to live on the edge of madness. Together they are very happy. Perpetual joy reigns in Maria Land. The end. Well, not really.